Reading today comes from the first letter of Peter, and it's chapter 2, verses 21 through 24. This is Simon Peter writing to the churches when he's an old man at this point. He says to them, "To this you were called, because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. He committed no sin, and no deceit was found in his mouth. When they hurled their insults at him, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. He himself bore our sins in his body on the cross, so that we might die to sin and live for righteousness. By his wounds you have been healed." God add his blessing to the reading of this word. This is a great thought, a great image. It's just the idea of the Apostle Peter, who we know so well, the fisherman, Simon Peter. He had so many things that he did during his life, that we read about in the Gospels, including drawing a sword when Jesus was arrested and cutting off the ear of one of the servants there. All the things that he did. He was the first to confess that Jesus was the Christ. But then just a minute or two after that, he says something that was just absolutely wrong. And Jesus says to him, "Get behind me, Satan." So many successes for him and so many failures. And being able to sit and to read what he was thinking about Jesus here as his life, later in his life, as he has all the wisdom of his years. And here we're at the beginning of this letter. What is the first thing that Peter would want to say about Jesus? Now, when we think about this and think about it ourselves, if we had been apostles of Jesus, if we had been among his many disciples, and we had seen all that he had done, we had heard his message, we had heard his parables, what would be the first thing that each of us would want to remember about Jesus? Now, we'd all be different, wouldn't we? We'd all have different things. Some of us might think, the Beatitudes. Those were beautiful. Blessed are the peacemakers. Yes, I'd want to mention that first. And others would say, no, how about the great miracle that he performed? That should be the first thing. Or let's get right to it, his death on the cross, his resurrection. That should be the first thing that we mention. Well, the Apostle Peter had something that was very interesting, because instead of right off the bat mentioning something that Jesus did, he mentioned what Jesus didn't do. He was reviled, but he didn't revile in return. He was caused to suffer. He was made to suffer, but he didn't cause suffer. It's interesting that Peter, and I guess maybe this says something more as much about Peter as about Jesus, it's what he remembered are the things that Jesus didn't do. And you think, Peter, gosh, there were so many times he made mistakes because he went rushing in to do something or to say something that was just his instinct. And so, of course, he saw Jesus. He got called into Jesus' ministry. And what caught his attention first and foremost is what Jesus didn't do. I want to suggest to you today that this is something that maybe we don't pay enough attention to. Because I think it is something that draws us in. It is something that we notice in other people. And it is something that other people notice in us. Yes, what we do is important, but what we don't do, what we avoid doing, that can tell people just as much about us. It can be just as important to those around us what we choose not to say, what we choose not to do. Now think about this. You've got a friend that you admire, somebody you really like, you think they've really got things figured out in their lives, and I bet it's because of some of the things that they do in their life, some of the disciplines that they have, some of the way they treat other people. But if you really think about it, you may also realize that one reason you respect that person, one reason you admire that person, are all the times you've seen them have the opportunity to do something and they avoided that trap of doing it. So maybe they were, to put it in old-fashioned words, maybe they were slandered. They were slandered. Somebody unfairly said something about them. Absolutely wasn't true. And boy, they knew they had something on this person, and they could slander this person right back. They could do that. But they chose not to. They chose not to. They didn't need to. They let that one go. Maybe they got faced with some great blow in their life, some great trauma that came their way. And it would have been just the perfect opportunity to crumble. But they didn't. They didn't crumble. They stood firm. Or maybe it was this, and this is something we can all relate to. Maybe we saw somebody, a friend of ours, who got faced with some real great temptation. And we know our friend, we know what tempts them, and we know how difficult it was for them to face up to that temptation. And what we notice about them is what they didn't do. They didn't give in to that temptation. So true. So much of our relationships, I think, we begin to understand people, not by what they do, but what they don't do. And I think most of us too have had this experience with a friend. Is maybe on purpose or maybe accidentally, the friend comes into some secret. That's ours, our secret. And they are given this secret. Maybe it's just by chance they come upon it, or maybe we entrust them with it. And we get to see whether or not they can not do something. They cannot tell other people this secret. And how much we learn about that person when we realize that they are, yes, they're the kind of person who can hear a secret, who can hear it and then not say something. Right? That's a big, we really get tripped up there. It's not in what we do, it's in not saying. It's so hard for us not to say the things that we know. We learn so much about people, again, not by what they do, yes, a little bit, but also what they choose not to do. Certainly it was that way with Jesus' followers. Jesus' followers, not only Peter, but others, you learned a lot about them, not only about what they did, but what they didn't do. Look at the Apostle Paul. One thing that Paul said in his ministry, and talked about in his writings, was all the bad things that had happened to him. All the reasons he had to be, angry and to be, want some vengeance on people. He said that one time he was lashed 39 times. He got 39 lashes, and then right after that, 3 times they beat him with a rod. And then one time they stoned him. So all of that, talking about all these different things. And yes, he was a little resentful of that, and that brought up, but right away he starts coming out with, you know what? But what we need to be focusing on is love. Love is what we need to focus on. He goes on to write these beautiful verses about love, that love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. See, he had this opportunity to strike back with anger and with vengeance, but instead he speaks of love. So I want you to be thinking about this week, and really every week, but particularly this week ahead. I want you to think about all the opportunities you're going to have to not do something. And that's going to be such a blessing that you don't do this thing. It's going to happen a lot in the world, but let me suggest to you that it may happen most of all right where you live, right at home. I'll tell you, it's one of the greatest gifts we can give each other. Those of us who live together in families and in couples, we're always thinking, what can I give this person? Birthday's coming up, Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, Father's Day. What does this person need? And we rack our brains trying to think of gifts that we can give them. And we let pass all these little opportunities to give them a simple kindness. Maybe by saying something sweet, but so often by simply not saying something that's unhelpful, that's unkind. We have so many opportunities as we go through our day, in our families, and yes, at work too, and among our friends, to build little shrines, little holy places where we have chosen not to say something that's hurtful or slanderous or untrue or unkind. Little shrines that we can build, and I know from these little shrines, great things can happen, great miracles can occur. Yeah, it could be that when we get to the end of our lives, or maybe even just to the end of this week, let's just say the end of this week. Let's say we're looking back at the end of this week, and we decide we're going to tally up everything good that we did, everything good that we accomplished. Now that'd be a great list, and I hope it's a huge, long list of wonderful things for each of us. But I think one thing we can do as well is tally up all those things that we didn't do. All those temptations that we avoided, all those chances to give in that we didn't submit to. All those chances to hit back when attacked. And we let it go instead. I think there's a good chance that at the end of this week, we'll be amazed by all that we have done for God. But we'll also be amazed at all the things we chose not to do. And how those things made this world one place that God would have it to be. Let's bow in prayer. Loving God, you do give us so many opportunities to do good things, to make a difference in this world by what we bring to this world, by feeding others, by showing kindness to others, by giving a comforting word when needed. Loving God, help us to see also the opportunities that exist for us to make this world a better place by avoiding some actions we know we should avoid, by avoiding some ugly words that need not be brought to life in this world. Lord, help us to find ways to change this world, not just by what we do, but also by what we choose not to do and not to say. Loving God, we give thanks for this opportunity you give us to come to this table, and it is a chance for us, Lord, to be able to sense your presence in our lives and be joined together as one community of faith. Lord, we do ask that you bless this bread and this cup as nourishment, physical and spiritual, for this week ahead. Lord, help us to feel nourished as we prepare to come forward now to receive these elements of bread and cup. It is in Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen.